Yeah, so this is a client play for me. 4% play. I gave this out earlier in the week. Got a nice number. Florida Atlantic plus 2.5. There are probably still twos out there, but I do think this is heading toward 1.5. I wouldn't even be surprised to see this go down to one. I have it as closer to a pick. And I think Florida Atlantic's the better of these two teams. I think Memphis is getting a little too much credit for the Houston win and the fact they got hot in their conference tournament. And now Florida Atlantic won theirs as well. But Memphis, of course, comes off with a win over Houston, which I think needs to be taken with a grain of salt. Marcus Sasser doesn't play. I don't know how engaged Houston was in that game, but I really think actually both of these teams have played really well down the stretch. We talked about Florida Atlantic winning their conference tournament, beating UAB, and I guess what it comes down to here is you have two teams that are very good that defend extremely well, but I think Florida Atlantic has the better path to victory over Memphis here. Specifically, Memphis will give up the 3-point shot. Florida Atlantic can make the three, and they're also very disciplined and they shoot good shots and hit them at a very high percentage. They're in the top 30 nationally 3-point shooting. They're in the top 25 nationally in field goal percentage. So this is a veteran team who really has five guys, any of which can be the guy. They don't really look to, it's not going to be like a Memphis situation where they really look to Davis to be that sort of um, game changer. There's five guys that all on Florida Atlantic, any can be the guy on any given day. I like how that profile is a little bit better. And I actually think Florida Atlantic has an advantage inside here in the paint where I could see them getting easier buckets while also taking away the lane for Memphis and turning Memphis into a little bit of a shooting team, which is less what Memphis wants to do. So there's just more ways that I see Florida Atlantic winning here. And for that reason, Teddy, I didn't think they should be underdogs. So I took the 2.5 for my client. I see it trending toward pick, but I still like the Owls here. I just think they're a better team. I can't believe I was betting against this team earlier in the year. Shame on me for that. I came around on this Florida Atlantic team. I thankfully stopped doing that, and now I'm going to back them. I think they win this first round.
So here's my question for you. How come Florida Atlantic hasn't gotten any hype? They had the longest winning streak in the country. They won or finished 28-3, and yet they're a team like a lot of times you see a quality mid-major start to get some buzz as they win game after game after game and cover point spread after point spread after point spread. It's like FAU got none of that this year. Any idea why?
Teddy, my only guess is that they're in the Conference USA, and for whatever reason, I feel like this happens every single year with Conference USA. They just get lost in the shuffle. They're in that weird, like, middling, like they're not really a mid major. They're not really mid majors, but they're not the high majors either. They're like one of those, like, they have football teams, so they don't really get like the buzz that like a mid major does when they get really hot and go on a run, like a Charleston, for example. But they're not, they're not high majors either. So like they typically, like, I look at these two conferences, I don't think the AAC top to bottom was that much better than Conference USA. Like, you look at Conference USA, there's some really good teams in there. North Texas, UAB. There's some quality teams in that conference. You go over to the AAC, obviously Houston goes without saying they're one of the best teams in the country. But you start to get down the list in the AAC, it's not very good. East Carolina, South Florida, like there's some bad teams in that conference. So to answer your question, I don't really have a good answer for it other than I feel like we see this every single year. The Conference USA just gets kind of lost in the shuffle. And if you go back in previous tournaments, Conference USA is typically a little bit undervalued. Like, there's years where, Middle Tennessee had a nice win as a big dog one year. UAB has had good runs in the conference tournament out of this conference. So I just think Conference USA gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. And I think that's the deal with Florida Atlantic. They don't get as much TV time. They're just not as big of a name as Memphis. And I think that's probably why they're an underdog on a neutral floor here, because I really do feel that the Owls are the better team.